Okay, now we're going to move to our neighbor to neighbor chat. And as we said, that in today's neighbor to neighbor chat, Pat's going to start us off by talking about planting kitchen herbs in the fall. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll take a few minutes for questions. So Pat, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Great. So the majority of time, the fall, all the herbs, they're thought of as a spring or a summer plant, but there are certainly some herbs that can benefit from an early start or an overwintering, or even just they have a quick growing season, so you can get fresh herbs even in the fall before the hard frost kicks in. We can go to the next slide. So why would you plant herbs in the fall? Well, it's a good time if you are starting some seedlings or you want to transplant. I'm a big transplanter. I move things around all the time. It's definitely the best time to do that. It'll give the roots a chance to settle in, get some growth in, and really pop in the spring. Planting in the fall allows the roots, the healthy spring. The important thing to know about your herbs, and you might, because the broad spectrum of herbs, I've only covered a few in this talk today, but is it a perennial? And the perennial herbs tend to be what could be described as a woody herb, like rosemary or sage or any of those thyme that are considered woody. A perennial or a biennial is like parsley or coriander is a very fast growing fall herb that many people like to use, also known as, cilantro, sorry, I have to remember that. Or you can have self-seeding herbs where you just throw out some seeds, they'll grow and then they'll self-seed themselves. And parsley is a kind of unique in that the first year it's good, the second year it'll be hardy. I had one that was like 3 feet tall. They're very, I have to say they're very sturdy. That was one I forgot to plant. I had set the pot on the ground and I had completely forgot to actually plant it. And the roots grew right through the bottom into the dirt. It grew 2 feet tall and I had tons of parsley, but then the next year it was a huge plant, but it was bitter. It didn't, so it's not really a perennial, but you can keep it longer. It offers other benefits to the garden. So that's up to the gardener how they want to use parsley. Next slide. So like in the case of annuals, which are ones that you would plant like about this time, you would start to put them in late August in this area. And you would monitor the USDA climate charts on when your fall time would be. I didn't get that in here, I apologize for that. But things like mint, everybody loves to plant mint all over their garden. Chives, parsley again, cilantro, those are some of the fast growing fall herbs that will start and you can harvest as a fall crop. The perennial ones are more that they'll harden in. If you plant some at this time of year, they'll harden in and provide you a good, again, harvest over the spring and summer and somewhat into the fall. They're typical lavenders, rosemaries, and they have, we're not really talking about their maintenance, but they do have some similar maintenance requirements like woody shrubs. They have to have some cutback and everything. And a lot of times fall is for the maintenance of those particular herbs. Also, many of the fall herbs are the ones you associate like with like Mediterranean countries or fall foods. And I guess there's a tie-in with the sage and the rosemary and the thyme. Those are all herbs that we associate with, that I associate at least with the fall period and harvest. Okay, we can do the next one. So I found this graphic, I really liked it. I don't know why it's so pale. I tried many ways to make it darker, but it was really good about what kind of herbs you can plant to get a fall crop, what would overseed, you know, what will give you, if you start in the fall, it'll give you the good head start on the spring. So it was a really good graphic. It's from the University of Florida Extension. Just a note, when I was researching this, it was kind of interesting. There aren't a lot of you know, articles about herbs in the fall, but the two sources that I found most helpful were in Florida, which of course is sort of a tropical environment, not completely relevant, but actually the herbs are consistent. They would grow here very similar. We just would have that frost, the end the season, whereas in Florida they might not have a hard frost. Theirs would tend to be more perennial. Or out in California, which again is a completely different planting environment than we have here. But herbs are a nice plant because they do pretty much grow in any environment. They just have different types of seasons. And so that makes them a good plant for anybody to grow. And the smell is so nice. But it's nice that the thought of having fresh herbs in the fall and just seeing that last bit of the garden produce something and getting the fresh herbs for cooking. So that's just some ideas on, again, we have the annuals that you can see. Basil is not, it's on this chart. And again, this chart came from Florida. Basil would not be a plant you'd plant in the fall here or overwinter here. It's a tender plant that doesn't, I can't even get mine to grow till May. And so, but the rest of them should be a pretty good fit for this area with the exclusion of the basil. The next slide. And so here's a little bit of information about what you want to look for. It's again, depending on, so this is like a good exercise for the gardener and how to like determine when to plant certain things. You would have to have a schedule. If you want a fall harvest, you need to, you know, move a couple months ahead of that frost date, which here is, again, about this time of year, you'd want to start looking at that. If you want to plant woody, herbs, you can wait till about mid-September, probably. Again, depending on the dates that the frost was kicking in. And then some seeds, they're not going to grow, but they'll get good stratification. That means they'll have a good spring burst and they'll be one of your first herbs to come up. But then you have to plant those even closer to the frost date. If you plant them too early, they won't get the proper treatment. They need to have, you know, be a lot closer to that cold window. So fall planting requires a good observance of the calendar and of the frost and of the weather, just like every other farming adventure. Again, the self-seeders and the really, you know, quick growing herbs, you just toss out some seeds, rake them in, they'll set in, and the next spring they'll burst right out for you. So it's a lot to think about. You could always start with just one or two, but I think it's something good to keep in mind that year round you could have fresh herbs. It could change your cooking schedule much as you do with your produce, and give you something else to think about and enjoy from your garden. When is the first frost? That's the question. And I'm going to have to, I don't have that information in here. I have to refer everybody to the USDA chart. We can look that up in the question section. I'd be happy to look that up. And that way you'd have a chance to count back to get an idea of when you want to start your fall herb garden. And the last slide is some references to what, you know, what information I found. I have to say you know, these sources that did have a good amount of detail, but, you know, you'll have to research if you're doing some specialty herbs or what will work in the fall based on the guidelines that we've seen here. So I think there's an opportunity for experimenting and just trying some different things. And that's what I have.
Great. Thank you, Pat.
Sure thing.
It gives me some ideas for maybe a few more plants I want to throw in my garden this fall before I give up on it. Kathy, did Pat have any questions?
Yes, there was another question. Someone said, I have lavender and rosemary growing now. How can I prepare them to overwinter?
That was my question.
Okay, so my understanding about lavender, and not an expert by any stretch, is you can trim it down now, or you can wait until early winter, like February, and trim it because it's a woody. You can trim it anytime. You have to trim, the lavender has to be trimmed. I'm sorry, I've just clipped off and now I can't see anybody. I'm trying to get back to my video screen. But the lavender only grows on the new growth. So if you, if you have old growth, it won't grow new leaves. But if you haven't been trimming it back regularly over the winter, then you're getting a very scraggly plant because now you have old growth, new growth. Now you have twice as much old growth, new growth. So it's getting very leggy. So when you have a new lavender plant, if you want it to be bushy, you need to cut it hard down, tight to the ground in the winter.
Okay.
And it'll grow back bushy. But if you cut it an older one and down to the woody, it won't come back because the woody, again, will not produce new growth. So if you cut too hard an older lavender, it's not, you won't be able to rescue it. You have to stay outside that green, in that green zone.
Okay, thank you.
So, if that's a problem. What was the other one? Rosemary is, I think, more forgiving. I would have to look that up, but I don't think rosemary has that same issue as the lavender does with the hardwood. I think you can keep it. Mine seems to grow on any, I don't actually really do much to my rosemary. It just kind of hangs out there.
Okay.
It's a very low-key woody, I think, herb. Good for me.
A low-key woody, a new descriptive term.
Is there anything else that you can do with, for instance, I have parsley, I have some basil, some thyme, anything we should do to prepare that for the winter? Does it die back or? Well,
the basil in this area will die off, and the first frost will kill it all the way down. I tried last year, I thought, well, I'm going to try to grow it inside. I thought, well, I'm going to bring it inside. It didn't thrive, I'll say that. I did get a few leaves I could pick off, to get a nice smell, but I couldn't, for instance, make pesto. But they're too tropical for here. To be perennial year round. They're just, you have to consider them an annual. I'm sorry, what was the other one? I should have written it down. You said basil and
parsley.
Now parsley will overwinter. I mean, it's hardy. You don't really have to do much to it. I would recommend cutting it back a little bit because it'll take over. But the second year is just not that good. So you might want to just consider it an annual and pull it up. I mean, it'll grow impressively, but it flowers really fast and it sets seeds, and it's not tasty at that point.
Thank you.
Sure.